Okay, so I think that's enough time for everyone to join, but let's get started. So everyone, welcome to Designing Technology for End Users. We are so happy to have you with us today and very excited to talk about this topic. Just a few logistical things before we get into it. We have reserved a big chunk of time at the end of the session to do a Q&A. So feel free to pop in any questions you have throughout the session in the chat window, and we'll try to use that to drive the Q&A at the end of the session. If we don't get to all of your questions during the session today, we will follow up via the Slack channel. So if you haven't joined the Slack channel for this particular session, be sure to do so. We will follow up on questions, and we'll also share some resources that we mentioned throughout the session. Then the other part is that you might notice that all participants are muted, and that's purely just so that we can have the panelists speak without much noise interference. Feel free to chat me directly in Slack or follow up in the channel if you have any further questions or want to talk to any of the panelists individually later on. So we are all here because we have a similar interest in designing technology solutions for organizations in the social sector. Whether you are at the precipice of choosing a new tool or designing a whole system for your organization, or if that's just something that you've begun to think about now, we all need to make some choices, and there's some factors that we need to take into consider during the process of designing, implementing, and rolling out systems like these. So today I thought we'd invite two of our partners, Vera Solutions partners, and we'll get into some introductions in a second, and to talk a bit about some of the success factors in a process like this, and give you some insights into what you can take away from their successes. So let's start with a round of introductions, and I'll begin with myself. You might wonder who this sheepish looking girl at the right side of the screen is. But my name is Izaldo Pisani. I'm a senior consultant at Vera Solutions. So here at Vera, we are focused at the intersection of technology, data, and social impact, and our mission is to amplify the impact of the social sector. We're a social enterprise, and we provide cloud and mobile-based technology solutions. And we have a team spread across 5 continents with offices in Geneva, London, Cape Town, where I am, Mumbai, Sao Paulo, and Washington, D.C. We have worked with more than 300 clients, ranging from small grassroots organizations to large NGOs, grant makers, social enterprises across 60 countries. And we've built more than 500 data solutions. So here you can see on the screen some of our global clients, and I'm delighted that 2 of these that you can see here are joining us today. Before I hand over to them to introduce themselves and their organizations, just a little bit more about me, so that I don't sound too much like a disembodied voice at the other side of the screen. So in my previous life, before I joined Vera, I was a trained social worker, well, I guess I still am. But I worked primarily in a community-based organization here in Cape Town, South Africa. And we worked in low socioeconomic communities around the city that were greatly infected and affected by HIV. And I worked primarily with the organization's field staff. So I did debriefing, counseling, and training of the field staff as they would go out and counsel children and adults and do some health training for them. And they did amazing work. They were the inspiration of my life, to see the compassion that they go out with. Most of these women were HIV positive themselves, so they had great hardships that they had to deal with. And they faced them all to make the lives of these children and adults a lot better, some of the most vulnerable people. A big part of frustration for me was that there was no way that I could really demonstrate the impact that they were having, even though I could see it every day and the community could feel it. It was really hard to show that on paper because we had no data solution or any system in place to do so. And there was a lot of requirements coming from funders to report on, And it felt like we were just constantly chasing these reports without actually telling a story of what we were doing. And so when I had the opportunity to work with Vera, I must say it's been the joy of my life to work with all these organizations, more than 20 myself that I've personally worked with, that I would only have dreamt of working with in my previous life. So I'm very excited about that, and I can see the real impact. But I also have a deep understanding, which I try to carry into every design that I do, in what the end user needs and the field staff actually needs, and not what we think they might need. And with that being said, it's a great honor to have two organizations that I felt did this very well, that really had their end user in mind when they came to us with their requirements and throughout the whole process. RefugePoint and World Bicycle Relief. And so I'll let them introduce themselves and their organizations, and we'll first hand over to Belinda Muya from RefugePoint. Belinda, over to you.
Great, thank you, Isel. My name is Belinda, and I manage the Livelihoods program here at RefugePoint, and I am based in Nairobi, Kenya. In general, I am a lover of data, particularly how we can use it to learn and make decisions. And I'm so excited to be part of the conference this year and to be able to share RefugePoint's digital transformation journey with you all from an end user's perspective. So a little bit about RefugePoint. We were founded in 2005, and we simply help the most at-risk refugees to find lasting solutions. And the way that we do that is first of all, we have a program around resettlement and complementary pathways. And basically what that means is we help refugees to legally and permanently relocate from one country to a safe country where they can rebuild their lives. But then, unfortunately, this is not a solution that is accessible to all the refugees who need it. And so what we do is we help those who are not able to relocate to become self-reliant in the countries that they have fled into. And this way they can cater for their own household needs and stop depending on erratic aid. I know that many of us here are in the humanitarian sector, and we know that aid over the years has become more erratic and more dwindling in terms of size. And so self-reliance predominantly means that, or involves stabilizing the refugees by providing direct services. And this we provide through medical care, food, housing, and education support. And then once the refugees and their households are stable enough, we help them to earn an income, and that way they can sustain a dignified life for themselves and be able to graduate from our services. Beyond the direct services that I've just spoken about, RefugePoint also has a field building and system change component to our work. And this is where we partner with other organizations across the globe. And we aim to train them, to share lessons, to share tools, and to get into, to collaborate towards improving and expanding refugee resettlement and self-reliance efforts. We focus our work on extremely vulnerable individuals or refugees, and these ones usually include children, unaccompanied minors, survivors of violence, refugees with medical needs, the LGBTIQ community, and also urban refugees. Our headquarters are in the USA, Cambridge, and our flagship program is here in Nairobi, but we've also worked in numerous countries across the world. And this here, what you're looking at is a slide of a quick overview of some of our impacts. And I will not go into this in detail, but I just wanted to grasp, for the sake of our discussion later on, to grasp and to give you a picture of the scope of our work and the many complex programs that we run and track. And this will explain why we needed the technology to help us to do our work better. Of course, do visit our website at the top of the slide, top right of the slide, if you want to learn more about our work. We'd love to connect with you more. But right now, over to you, Lawrence.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Lawrence Banda. I am a monitoring and database manager for World Bicycle Relief. I'm based in Lusaka, Zambia. So just briefly about World Bicycle Relief. We are an international organization that mobilizes people through the power of bicycles. We believe in the power of bicycles to help people overcome transportation challenges, and we envision a world where distance is not a barrier to independence and livelihood. So the organization was formed in 2005, and through our education, health, and economic programs, we distribute these specially designed bicycles. They are called buffalo bicycles, very strong, reliable bicycle meant to withstand tough terrain. And we are currently working in Zambia, in Zimbabwe, in Malawi, in Ghana, and in Colombia. So one of our key social interventions is called Bicycles for Education Empowerment Program. And this is where we are using technology. So under this program, we provide bicycles to students, teachers, community volunteers, with the aim of contributing to improved education outcomes for rural children, especially the girls, as we make sure that 70% of the beneficiaries are girls. So we have a very interesting, unique business model combining philanthropic programs and social enterprise, which creates a foundation for sustainability and scalability. So with that, other NGOs working in various sectors and also government institutions are able to purchase bicycles through our social enterprise arm. So that's a brief of what we do.
Thank you, Lauren. Thanks, Belinda. That's really useful introduction. So the next part that I want us to just give the audience a bit of an overview is what the need was that you were both facing. What challenges did you have in data management and collection and analysis? And then what solution did we end up working out together? And Lauren, since we have you on the screen and the bicycles here, why don't you kick us off?
Thank you. Yeah, so as our education program, which I mentioned, continued to evolve across countries, it also meant increased demand for data on our field activities and their related program outputs and outcomes to be able to understand and deal with issues, measure our impact, and also for program quality improvement. So when it came to ensuring that all the much needed information from the field is collected in a timely manner, and also it is accurate, that's where we had challenges. And at the center of these challenges was the fact that we implement our programs mostly in remote settings where communication is often a challenge. And now, because all our M1D forms were paper-based, to have these forms completed from our program sites and have them sent to our offices for data entry, that became a big challenge for us. And we also experienced other challenges for depending entirely on paper forms, such as storage, loss of data, as some forms got lost or damaged, data entry errors when transferring data from paper to electronic system, and so on. So all these issues made it difficult for us to get timely and accurate data to be able to inform decisions and tell stories about the impact of the bicycles in the field. So we had to explore how we can use technology to enhance our data collection process and start to shift away from the error-prone paper-based forms. So we sought out a technology that is robust in meeting our data needs, less complex, and user-friendly, and also that would integrate perfect with our Salesforce database. So that's how we adopted Tarwex for mobile data. To have our system redesigned, and we had all our M1D forms configured in Tarwex, and everything was up and running. So selected sites were issued with phones, tablets, and now for all the indicators that we were tracking, which you just saw on the screen, we're able to get real-time data from these sites. And for the sites where internet is a challenge, we're still able to get data because of that offline access functionality of this technology. And we're able to create dashboards, and everything is much better.
Great. So you were already using Salesforce for monitoring and evaluation, and then to also do data collection in the field in areas where there was low connectivity, and to get real-time data back, you also implemented TerraWorks, which is built natively on Salesforce as well.
Yeah.
Great. Belinda, what about you? Do you want to tell us a little bit about your challenge and the solution?
Sure. So there are a lot of similarities with the challenges that WBR were facing, and I'm also very sure that many organizations will relate with the challenges that we were facing as RefugePoint. So, like I said, we were founded 15 years ago, and so over the last 15 years, we've had a lot of organic growth as an organization. And our programs and our operations have grown both in scope and in complexity. And now we have a lot more, way more services which are interconnected in a very complex way, especially our case management approach, which means that we provide numerous services to the same household or to the same individual over a long time. And what this means is that we have more parameters to track and more data to work with and learn from. And the data and information management systems that we were using before were develop as we go solutions, you know. And so we had too many different tools for data collection and storage. Basically each program having like a siloed data collection and storage solution for themselves. And this meant that our data was scattered all over the place, and there was no uniformity in how we were collecting or storing the data across the different programs. So as you can imagine, just analyzing that data and learning from it was quite difficult, especially when considering that some of our services are layered and they're very connected, and you need to be able to see a full picture for you to make the right decision. So we needed a simple solution that would harmonize data from all programs to allow us to collaborate better and also to tell our full story accurately. And additionally to that, and I know that I've joked about this before, that the proverbial dog used to eat our homework a lot because we had data reliability challenges and data loss challenges as well. And another issue was that our service teams are predominantly field-based. And this presents three issues. One, we needed a solution that was going to make mobile data collection efficient, to allow us to have real-time data uploaded, and thirdly, to give us convenient and secure remote access to the database. And this particular need, the last one about convenient remote access to the database, has proven very beneficial during this COVID-19 season, where we have all been forced to work remotely, and it was very easy for us as an organization to just move away from the office and have everyone continue with their work seamlessly from home. Lastly, the database that we were working with was also very static. It was not versatile enough to allow upgrades as the organization was growing. And it also needed a lot of technical knowledge to process the data and to actually utilize it. So program staff and teams like myself would need to rely heavily on IT and the monitoring team to just process the data and produce information to make decisions. And this was leading to a lot of inefficiencies. So jumping over to the solution, we are using a combination of Salesforce as our main database management system and TaroWorks for our mobile data collection. So pretty much everyone in the team has a mobile gadget that is connected to the internet. And like Lawrence mentioned previously, Salesforce does have the offline and online provisions. So it really helps you to sync seamlessly between when you're not able to connect to the internet and when you're able to just connect and sync your data. And we're using these two solutions to track household data, operational data, direct service data, and also impact measurement data through our self-reliance measurement tool. With these solutions, we've got one single source of truth that has brought all our program data together. And so teams are able to collect data with their mobile gadgets right in the field and upload it to the live database right from the field. And this is, closing the feedback loop and saving us a lot of time. And it's also brought on a lot of efficiency. I want to mention that we are still in the final phases of development and deploying these two solutions because we split our adoption into phases. And I believe, Isel, this is something that we'll talk about a bit later when we discuss issues around design and timeline.
Yes, definitely. Thanks, Belinda. I'm excited to talk about that piece. I think it's very important. So what I hear from both of you is that you needed a streamlined way to make decisions, really. And for this, you needed something that promoted data integrity, preventing data loss, can ensure accuracy of your data, and also timeliness so that it's in real time and you don't have to kind of have these delays between data collection and analysis. And you two have very different business models, but we ended up having the same two tools, Salesforce and TaroWorks for both of you, but yet we can see there are nuances that we could customize to both of your use cases. And I think that's the ideal that we would want to strive for in building these types of solutions, is ensuring that it's fit for purpose and fit for the organization's needs, but making use of best practice technology. So I really do want to dig into that a bit more today and how we got there. So on the screen, we have the user engagement life cycle, the way we look at it. There's definitely a lot more that goes into the design and implementation of these complex systems. But when we think about when we engage users, there's 3 points that I would really like to highlight today. One is discovery, so thinking of the requirements of the organization broadly and of individual users. Thinking about decision-making, how do you choose which technology to use, and other points in the process. And then lastly, but definitely not the least, is training and user adoption. How do we practice good change management? So I want us to go through these 3 main points today and have a bit of a conversation about how the two of you did it in your respective organizations. So at Vera, we always say training starts with the first sales call, and sometimes jokingly, but mostly that's really important for us to make sure that our partners start thinking about who will be involved in this process from the very beginning, and start to get acquainted with the technology that they're going to be working with, because it is a long process of user adoption, and to ensure success, we want to involve users early on. And we often see that our partners come to us at first, and then change management is often an afterthought. But we work together with them, and with both of you, WBR and RefugePoint, we've had really long relationships. And we feel quite honored to be part of that whole journey and growth process. And that's definitely our model, is to grow together and be with you throughout the whole process. That being said, let's talk a bit about the discovery process, requirements, elicitation, and uncovering. So this is something that we've seen a few levers that we can pull on to ensure success of this process. Oftentimes it involves in-person requirements or discovery sessions. So we go to our partners, we often go with them to the field, and we get the requirements together and see what we can uncover that maybe we haven't thought about before. That's always a big indicator of success. And then we also see other things like early prototyping of solutions to get feedback really quickly. But turning that over to you, Belinda, what are some of the important success factors that you saw in this project with RefugePoint that you thought was really important for the success of the project?
So I would like to start by emphasizing two main lessons that we've learned through this. And the first one is that the discovery process is absolutely critical. Any organization looking to develop a database management system solution really needs to do a thorough analysis internally. And I repeat and say, don't skip this process, don't skip this step, because you need to be very clear on what you need to achieve. And you need to ask yourself questions around, what challenges are you facing? What has been working for you? What are your biggest pain points? And you need to be as specific as possible. And it is also very critical for the developer to understand you as an organization in order to be able to develop a fitting solution for you. And the second lesson is that consider both your current and your future needs, and don't be lost in the now, because organizations and the nature of our work change a lot. You need to ensure that the system is relevant for as long as possible, and you try to focus your future needs as much as is feasible. RefugePoint was addressing challenges that had been identified and felt over a long time. But that said, we still did a very thorough discovery process with a consultant, that's Vera Solutions. And how we did that is we brought together representation from all teams, including our HQ. And this way we were able to identify particular needs at every level. And then we brought it all together to design one solution. And we did this through a lot of correspondence, but also, and very importantly, through physical meetings. I remember Vera actually traveled all the way over to Nairobi, and we had a week-long discovery session with them. I'd like to stop there, and then we can speak about the scope of work a little later.
Great, thanks, Belinda. I really liked what you said about involving different users, so not just the frontline users, but everyone at every level, and thinking of different ways that might be appropriate to get feedback. So whether that's in-person time or correspondence, some might be more appropriate than others. So I think that's an important thing to remember. Moving over to you, Lawrence, what would you say were some of the important things to consider when you were thinking about how to start the process of deciding on this tool for WBR?
Thank you. Yeah, so for us, we did realize that it was key to get everybody on board during this process. And so we had to engage our key stakeholders, the schools, the community volunteers, who are also the end users. So it was important that we have discovery meetings with them at this stage to get more insights into the challenges they were facing with regards to capturing and sharing data with us, and get their perspectives of the technology itself, and just to map out what their expectations were. So we also had discovery meetings with our program staff and also country leadership teams. So in the end, we had a shared understanding of what was expected of the project, and a shared vision of our M&E system, which was important for everybody to feel they were part of the process, and that feeling of ownership. And when it came to defining the requirements for development, it was also much easier for us.
Yeah, and what I like about that is it's a very different group of end users to what Belinda had mentioned. You have these partners in the community, a much bigger group of users that's not internal staff members, but yet you still went out to gather their feedback. And I think that is so important, and I really commend you for doing that. So when we think about the next step, once we've gone through discovery, it's about making the decision on what tool we're going to use, which platform are we going to work with, and what will we include in this project, the scope of work, as you mentioned, Belinda. So it's important to think about what might be the considerations you want to think about during this phase. And I was wondering, Lawrence, if you can mention to the audience maybe some things that they can keep in mind during this process. What are some of the important factors and constraints that they want to think about when they're making these decisions and choosing a tool?
Yes, so I think one other important factor to consider is the costs that will come with a particular solution. What will it cost to have your solution developed or designed? What is the cost of licenses and the other implementation costs? For example, we had to factor in issue of phones, mobile data that they will need, and the training, the level of training, of course, that you require will have some cost implication. So it's important to factor in all these so that they fit into your budget limitation.
Yeah, and particularly choosing, I know that TaraWorks was the tool that was important for you to choose during this implementation of your system. Other criteria that you thought about early on, you mentioned that it had to be both user-friendly and robust. What are some of the criteria that you used to measure which tool to choose?
Yeah, so I would say it came down to the issue of functionalities and the features that comes with TaraWorks and how they would fit into our needs and context. So it has to be something that is user-friendly, of course, and taking into account who our end users are. And the other issue, most important, was how easily it can be customized to meet our needs. And we also had to look at the level of support available. We knew implementing such a technology would require technical assistance when it comes to training, issues of testing, troubleshooting, upgrading issues. So we had to look at the level of support available for smooth transition and also during the implementation. Okay, and in our case, what was also important was to look at how easily we can scale up the solution to accommodate our growing program activities. We started with about 15 sites last year, and we added about 38, and we are planning to add on additional sites, and especially new countries. Yeah, and of course, most important, at the end of the day, all these considerations are made knowing that it must be something, a solution that fits within your budget. So cost becomes important at all stages.
Yeah, and I think that is considerations for any organization to think about when choosing a tool. Here at Vera, when we make recommendations as well, when we work with our partners on which tool to use, we often think of these 10 criteria you can see on the screen now when choosing technology to work with. And we have a really good blog post that we'll send you a link to that you can dig into that a little bit more, but it really boils down to 3 main questions for us. Is firstly, to what extent will the technology meet your needs today? And that really covers, the features, the user friendliness, and the security. And then the second question is, how will this meet our needs in the future? And I think, Belinda, you mentioned a bit about it's not just thinking about today, but also in the future, and that's a really important consideration. So in this question, we can look at the criteria for flexibility, interoperability, so how does it work with other systems, innovation, and the ecosystem of tools available for that particular technology. And then the last question is obviously what you mentioned, Lawrence, is how well does it work within your budget? And there's different costs to consider, not just the initial setup costs, but also ongoing licensing and maintenance. So I think you really hit on all the different things that's important to think about when choosing a technology. So that's really interesting around the technology and the budget. I wonder, Belinda, do you have anything to add? Any other considerations in the decision-making process?
Not quite, Isal, because you and Lawrence have covered most of them. And one of the few that I can add is that you need, and in our case, we were able to look at a solution that had very good support afterwards. You know, tech support to make sure that they're troubleshooting in time whenever we have any tech issues.
Yeah, that's certainly important to feel like you're not alone once the system is handed over to you. I like something you mentioned a bit earlier around phasing of the project. And I wonder if you could speak a bit more to the timeline and how that factored into the decision around the partner that you're working with, the tool, and how you actually go about implementing the solution.
Mm-hmm. So like I mentioned before, and this actually marries in with the costs point that Lawrence has brought up and yourself, in terms of deciding the scope of work and the requirements, budget and the nature of your work are the main determinants. And these were the main determinants for us on our end. And so what we did, we split our development and rollout into 3 phases spanning over 3 years. We are in the last phase and hopefully should conclude by the end of this year. This way we were able to do it in manageable bits without disrupting our services. And it's also given us a lot of time to test out the solution after every phase and give our feedback to Vera and to make the necessary changes to the design before we embark on the next phase. And so to ensure that our development or our phased approach had a logical progression, what we did initially during the discovery workshops was to identify our priorities and dependencies. And basically we started with the biggest pain points and those sections that would form a foundation for subsequent builds. And for us, that was the case management as approach or a bit of our work. And then basically what we've been doing pretty much over time is building on this initial build. In terms of timeline determinants, the 2 timeline determinants that I can think of are basically those 2 that I've said, the nature of work and your budget. Again, going back to the budget, it's not just the monetary bit, it's resources in general. And that means both the money as well as the time and human resource. And you need to know, to ask yourself questions around, you know, how is your budget structured? Is it funded year on year, or do you have all the funds to go in one go? And in terms of the ability of the staff and the teams that you're working with, is, I mean, how much time do they have to dedicate to this? And, you know, how much time do they need to test the solution and to adopt the change? And this will determine how fast you can deploy the solution. In the complexity of your work and your program also has a lot to contribute to whether you're going to have a phased approach or you're going to have to, you can do an overhaul. And you just need to ask yourself how fast even your clients and your end users can adopt the change without disrupting the services. And, you know, are there bits of your solution that have to be deployed fast before layering other bits? And, you know, just making sure that you don't disrupt your work as much as possible as you deploy the new solution.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we also recommend mostly, is to do a phased approach when that's possible. Exactly the reasons that you said, is because if it's complex, you can break it down. If it's going to be a big lift for user adoption, then having a phased approach is a good way to start introducing users piecemeal to the new functionality. And of course, it's a way to level out the budget that you're spending. But I really like what you said, Belinda, on that you have to consider it's not just a monetary budget, it's really time of users. And I think that is such an important factor that is often overlooked, is that it's not just about the money that we're going to spend on this, but we also need people's time, and people have normal full-time jobs. So adding this on is a expense for individuals and for organization. I think that's a really good point to add. So with that being said, I also want to talk now a bit about training and user adoption or change management. And as I said, that's certainly something that we think about a lot. And I'm sure that the two of you also thought about it as well. You both have so many users that will end up using your systems. And by no means it can be a very daunting process for anyone to think about how do we roll this out and get people to use it and have it be impactful for them. So I was wondering, Lawrence, if you can tell us a bit about how you went about training and what were some of the important factors that you thought led to the success of your training initiatives.
Thank you. So when it comes to training, again, that's where you need to fully understand your end users. So you need to understand, for example, their existing level of digital literacy. And for example, in our case, most of our end users did not have any digital skills at all, which was very important to factor in. And we had to look at what would be their specific roles so that we're able to know what to integrate into the training. It was also important to us to look at any other skill that they may need that will enable them to utilize the technology fully. So all those factors must be considered. So as I mentioned, our end users are community volunteers mainly, and selected teachers from the schools where we implement our programs. So we had to provide a 2-day training, and our training modules cover a wide range of topics, from the use of smartphones, the data collection and sharing process, right up to the technology itself and its functionalities. And most importantly, these trainings take a more practical approach to allow them have that hands-on experience and get that confidence when it comes to working with smartphones and also the application. I think those are the issues that we had to look at during our training our end users.
Great. And Belinda, anything to add? Anything that was different on your end?
I would say that the general factors to consider in general are the level of skill and of your end users, like Lawrence has just said, but also the level of complexity of the product or the solution. And hopefully it's not simple, it's not very complex, it's simple and intuitive, but just also to consider the level of complexity, even with how it merges with the technology that you already have. And of course, time and budget. And I can't emphasize much about how training is critical, because to me, this has been something that I've learned through our own experience here at RefugePoint. Unlike the experience that has been shared by Lawrence about the tech skill level of their users, our teams are pretty tech savvy. And I have to confess that before our trainings, I would have been tempted to say, you know, the solution that the developers had built for us under Salesforce and TaraWorks, they were pretty intuitive. And we do have a tech savvy team, right? So why don't you just send us over the user guide and we'll be good to go. But now looking back, I really appreciate how we have done it, because we pretty much bring everyone together for a physical week-long training before deploying every phase. And of course, this requires a lot of resources, but it has proven very beneficial to us, because everyone gets a chance to stop the normal daily grind, that is that usual work. They get to stop and just think through the product, test it, provide feedback without, you know, having a noisy, busy schedule, and give the feedback before we deploy the solution and go live. And it has also been very beneficial to give the teams a lot of time to practice in a test environment before going live within every phase. I think one thing that I would want to add is that equally as critical as training is selecting a developer and a tech solution that has great responsive support after the training and deployment phase. This way, you can be able to address issues that may come up after you deploy and go live. But hopefully none comes up, but just in case.
Yeah, we always say it's not just a once-off. Here's your system, and then you go ahead. It's a kind of a process.
Yeah.
And I like that both what you emphasized, Belinda, is that you have quite different user groups that you were training for, the two of you, RefugePoint and WBR. But yet I can see the golden thread was that the training was attuned to your end user. So whatever their level was, you made sure that what you or how you were training them addressed their skill level and need. And I think the other thing that I also saw here is the importance of feedback and just time spent. So both of you took the time out to do the training and make sure that people also take time out of their days to do the training and give feedback. And that seems to have been important in both of your cases. So with that being said, I think, you know, in the beginning when you two were speaking about your initial need and the solution, there was a clear need you know, for finding a tool that supports your decision making in a versatile and flexible way, and that's also very user friendly for your end users. So I was wondering if the two of you can maybe speak a bit to the impact of how has the technology improved how you collect, manage, and use your data. And why don't we start with you, Belinda?
I'd like to cover a couple of our key outcomes. We've definitely seen many. Some of them were not even part of what I had anticipated when we were getting into this, but I've seen benefits beyond, you know, what my expectations were. But the first one, and probably the most critical to me, is that we now have a single source of truth. We are all working from the same script, so to say, because all our programs are seamlessly linked in one database. The other is that we now have an easier way to do data manipulation and reporting. Remember earlier I said that with our previous systems, we had to rely heavily on IT and the monitoring teams to manipulate data and help us use it. But now front-end users like myself can easily run reports and, you know, use the data. And this is closing the feedback loop more and increasing efficiencies of teams and you know, someone like me who needs to use data every day. The other one is that we are now making stronger decisions based on the real-time data. And real-time data is very critical for teams like ours that are spread out in the field or in different stations or even in different countries. The other benefit has been the ability to collect and sync data into the database right from the field. And this has brought on a lot of efficiency. We're spending less time on data entry. And what that means is that we have more time to deliver our services and connect with our clients. And I think that's a very big win. And we've also eliminated the errors that the manual data transfers were presenting. And of course, even more relevant during this uncertain COVID-19 season is the ability to have secure remote access to a DBMS, because had we not adopted this solution, Salesforce and TerraWorks, we would not have been able to transition to remote work as smoothly as we did, and neither would we have been able to continue providing the life-sustaining services that we have as efficiently as we have, because it was just a plug and play for us. We pretty much left the office physically and are working remotely, but our work is still continuing seamlessly. And I can guarantee you that before these solutions, this would not have happened. We'd have had a very tough and rocky transition period to remote work. So I think COVID-19 has made me realize even the importance of such a system. And lastly, but not least, the dog is no longer eating our homework, because we have a very secure and reliable database, and we, you know, issues around data loss and reliability, and not, you know, we're not dealing with that right now. And I'm sure we have so many other outcomes, but I know that Lawrence will cover many more.
Thanks, Belinda. Yeah, Lawrence, can you also add what impact has your system and your solution had for WBR?
Yeah, thank you. So in addition to being able to get real-time data on all our program indicators that we are tracking in a consistent and uniform manner. And I think one interesting feature about our solution that has really streamlined our workflow and process has been the barcode scanning functionality. So this has made the work of our community volunteers much easier and exciting when it comes to assigning bicycles to individual beneficiaries. So this process used to be quite tedious and time consuming when they had to record manually the serial number of the bicycle. This is a 15-digit number, so it was not easy for community volunteers to be recording for each and every beneficiary. So now what happens is they will have a list of beneficiaries assigned to their phones or tablets. So when they open the phone, they see the approved list of beneficiaries, and all they have to do is to just scan the barcode on the bicycle, and it captures the serial number, which is linked to the beneficiary, and the process is completed. So this is a very exciting functionality for us, and I think it has really benefited the work that used to be difficult with the community volunteers and the schools.
Great, thanks, Lawrence. I think, you know, my takeaways as well from speaking to the two of you early on, I think, Lawrence, you said something interesting around you needed a tool that was both robust and user-friendly enough. And I think throughout this conversation, I've seen a trend of this need for a balance between the complex and the simple. So having very complex needs because you have complex programs that you're working with and beneficiaries, but needing a tool that's simple for users to use. And having something that's flexible enough, a tool that's flexible enough and has advanced functionality like the barcode scanning, but really simplifies the user process. And I think with both of you, I see that those solutions really achieve that for you, which is delightful and wonderful to be a part of. So before we get into questions, I see a few coming in. I was wondering, Belinda, do you have any final takeaways for the audience to emphasize on what to consider when embarking on a project such as this? And when you're finished, we can have Lawrence also share some final thoughts.
Okay. I believe we've covered a lot in the 1 hour. But the key takeaways that I would want anyone to come out of this session with, especially if they're planning to adopt a tech solution around their data, is the first one. I'll cover 4. The first one is don't skip the discovery process. I think I've emphasized that before. It's because it plays a critical role in ensuring that you and your developer capture the real current needs and also allow you to focus for the future. And it is, just like Lawrence shared, it is very important for you to bring everyone in the conversation, your organization, everyone in your organization and the users as well. But if you absolutely can't bring everyone on board, maybe because of the scope of the size of your organization, then ensure that you have representation from every level and every team. The second takeaway is dedicate ample time and resources for user training, feedback, and pretty much readjusting of the design before you do the final product rollout. The third one is that the design process depends heavily on your budget and the nature of your business and the nature of your work. So you need to select an implementation plan that makes the most sense for your resources and your workflow. So what worked for us at RefugePoint may not necessarily work for you. And as an organization, you need to ask yourselves, based on your nature of your budget, do you need to schedule your project into phases, or can you do a one-off overhaul? Ask yourself, based on the nature of your business or your work, can you do an overhaul, or do you need time to transition slowly without affecting your operations? And the last one you want to ask yourself is, how much time do your teams and even the clients that you serve, how much time do they need to learn and adopt to the change? And you have to adopt a very comfortable pace for everyone. Should you decide to do a phased approach, then you need to be very careful to identify your priorities and your dependencies so that your solution development follows a logical progression. Lastly, and not least, is that needs change, and you need to remain flexible. And the needs can change as your business or your program or your work changes. And this can be before the deployment or even after. So you need to be ready to adapt your tech solutions, and your developer needs to also be ready to, for that. And the last one is that sometimes part of the solution can end up having a ripple effect on the rest of your work or operations. And I can attest to this, where when you deploy one phase or one part of your solution, it ends up having a ripple effect and solving many other problems simultaneously. So you need to be able to be very flexible to these kind of changes, Isel.
Thanks, Belinda. Lawrence?
Thanks. I think I can add 2 points to what Belinda has said. First of all, it's important that you have an ongoing feedback gathering mechanism. There are a lot of new things that you are likely to discover during the course of the implementation, and it's important that you continue getting feedback and also reorienting the end users throughout the course of the implementation. And there are a lot of solutions out there that may offer, that may help you with whatever you are doing. But it's important to look at how stable the solution is and who is behind that solution. I think that's very, very critical for you to arrive at a very credible, robust technology.
Definitely. I think, from my side, from the two of you, I've also learned that, a lot of partners that come to us, they're not always aware of the options that's available to include the voices of all of their users during these different phases of a process such as this. And I think the two of you are just testaments to that. It's entirely possible, and that it's very successful. So thank you both for sharing your experiences with us today. I would like to hand over for some questions. So I see some coming in on the Slack channel. I'll take a look at that now. But if we don't get to that, remember, please to just follow up on the Slack channel, or if you want to speak to any of us individually, we're all on Slack, so you can reach out. So let's see. There's a question here from Alicia. What strategies do both organizations use to share information back with communities? How do they leverage technology to do this? So maybe we can start with you, Belinda. How did you go about sharing any of your information that you've gathered back to the communities, and do you use any technology to do that?
I will consider community in 2 ways. One is our community of partners and funders and people that we work with, and the other is the community that we serve. And so directly to the community that we serve, we pretty much connect with them on a day-to-day basis. So we have, remember I said we have a case management approach. So we have a very intimate connection with the communities that we serve. And so for them, it has mainly been on a very verbal level, as well as, having things like focused group discussions and such. But we also have our outlets and media channels that we use to relay our information. We have conclusive reports that we post out through our website. And you can go and check all those out. We have a lot of the matrices that we cover or we track that are posted and reported there. So mainly those are the main channels that we use. And if anything comes up as we continue with the discussion, I will answer that directly in the Slack channel.
Great, thanks, Belinda. Lawrence, what about you? How did you share information back with your communities?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think it's a question that would also speak to some of the considerations that developers of these technology should be able to make. If we're able to share reports or dashboards with the end users, Yeah, so, but of course we have come up with a mechanism where we have our routine meetings with them, and during those meetings we're able to share summaries of all the activities that are happening and all the outcomes that they are tracking. So we're able to provide some kind of feedback to them to understand what is happening.
Great. And I believe earlier you showed the slide with the dashboards that you're getting from your data, Lawrence. I think that's also quite powerful when you can share those visualizations with your stakeholders to understand the data. And I think that leads in well with another question that we get here on the Zoom chat from Ayesha, which asks, how has data visualization helped both in decision making? So maybe Lawrence, you can start us off this time.
Yeah, so to us, that's very, very critical. And you know, information that is presented in a manner that is interactive and like some of the dashboards that we're able to do with our Salesforce, I think that becomes very important in terms of communicating the message and informing decisions about the program. So, I mean, such visualization and such kind of dashboard, it's a very, very critical thing to consider, even as you plan to set up your data management system.
What about you, Belinda? Is that something that you started thinking about yet?
Yes, in terms of visualization, I think even during the discovery workshops, that's one of the things that many of us as participants from RefugePoint were communicating that to Vera Solutions, that we know that we have a lot of data and it can be a bit hard to digest all of that and make decisions, especially when you want to move really fast and you want to work with real-time data. So both TaraWorks and Salesforce have very great user interfaces. We've tested out a few others, and I would say that those two have really good user interfaces. The architecture is really great for even a lay user who's not really tech savvy. And when it comes to even visualization, the dashboards, especially on Salesforce, have been able to really help us just get a snapshot view of whatever it is that you're working on and helping you to make really quick decisions. I think it's one of the best value adds that comes with Salesforce, and even just having and using that quickly to share information with our communities, just linking that with the previous question, just the way that it digests and is able to give you a very clear picture in one snapshot, even helps us to be able to share that information within the organization and also with others.
Wonderful. So there's a couple of questions coming in around TaraWorks as a tool for data collection, especially in rural areas. So there's a question around unreliable Wi-Fi. And I mean, I can speak to that. TaraWorks is an app that you can download on your phone or tablet and allows you to collect data offline and only sync it when you get back to a data connection, whether that's Wi-Fi or else. So maybe Lawrence and well, you're both using TaraWorks, right? So Lawrence, maybe you can tell us whether you use the offline functionality and how that's been working for you.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the factors that we had to look at when considering which solution to adopt. We know that where we implement our programs, these are off-grid communities. Network is a challenge, communication is a challenge, and we have a number of sites where internet is a problem. So I think that's a functionality that they utilize. So they're able to collect, enter the data and save it on the device, even without internet. And then when they have access to some internet at any point, they can then be able to synchronize that data, and it comes through to our database. So I think it's one important functionality that has helped our work.
Great, thanks, Lawrence. So we have a question here from Emily. I'm interested in knowing about ongoing training and learning and development for staff and end users. Are there people or teams devoted to this? Is it part of onboarding? And are there any suggestions or tips for implementing ongoing learning? So I guess let's start with you, Belinda. Do you have a dedicated team for or person for learning and development, or how do you structure this?
You remember previously when I spoke about budget and I said that it's split between the financial bit of it and also the skill or human resource, because it's one thing to have the developer create the product and hand it over to you, but as much as you can get a really good developer like like Vera Solutions, who are always there to answer our questions and to troubleshoot, you also need someone in-house to be able to manage the deployment and the change management process internally. And we do have a point person who does that. That's our monitoring and evaluation department. So they pretty much give us that buffer or rather link between the developer and with Salesforce support teams as well with the rest of the team, because they understand exactly what you're facing. We can express our pain points to them and clearly, and they can be able to troubleshoot that. So yes, we do have an in-house point person that is able to troubleshoot on a real-time situation.
Great, thanks, Belinda. That's definitely something that we always advise on, and actually from the very beginning we start talking about identifying the correct people as well, and during this process. And as there is a system administrator for your system there, it's always good to have some sort of governance team that or in the Salesforce world, we like to call a center of excellence. And those are the people from every level, from the executive level, from the end user level, that's involved in actually maintaining communication around the system use and making sure that training happens on a continuous basis. So that aligns well with how we also advise to do things. Then we have a question from me around scope creep and asking whether it's easy to stick to the scope of work for a project such as this, or do you typically allow for some scope creep to happen over time when the partner might change their mind? I can speak a little bit to that, but I was wondering for Belinda, if you want to say anything about your scope of work. Did it change over time? Was it easy to stick with it?
For the most part, I'll say that. And remember, I mentioned that sometimes solutions that are deployed fast can affect the nature of the work afterwards, and you can end up having a ripple effect in terms of solutions, so that one solution actually solves other problems unintentionally or can create other needs or requirements as well. And I can say for us, for the most part, we've stuck to the scope of work that we had actually had, but we've also had, and I can say that Vera has been very allowing in terms of changing bits and pieces here and there, depending on the change in our own use cases. And I think when you also think about your budget and make your budgetary decisions, you need to allow for this as well. Just have a buffer in your budget to allow for when such scope changes occur. Because if you have a robust program, especially like ours, and where you have a lot of interconnection within services or programs, it is very likely that one deployed solution may affect the others in a way that you may not have been able to focus. So yes, I think, yeah, for us, we've stuck with that a lot. But I know that some of the team members that are working at Vera that I connect with may say that Belinda has been changing a little bit here and there, but yes.
Thanks, Belinda. And we always want to think of it from a very logical point of view, is that, we always see if it's fit for purpose. We're not going to stick to anything if it doesn't make sense for you anymore. And I think that's why I really liked what you said about the phased approach. And I think that's why we always really like to go in that direction as well, is because it allows us to build in a very modular way and allow for some early prototyping and testing so that we can get feedback quicker and don't have to wait till we deliver the final system before we actually realize that something needs to change. And that's why we also like to do the discovery process, discovery and design, as a separate scope of work whenever possible. And I think that leads well into Martin's question around, can you please share some more insight around the discovery process? What are the activities that you do during this process, and any particular approach or tool you use to identify pain points? So I'll speak a little bit to how we like to approach things from Vera Solutions' point of view, but then I'll also hand over to Lawrence and Belinda to say a bit about how their individual discovery went down. I think Belinda spoke a little bit about it during the session already. So we, like I said, we like to do this in person, and it depends on how many users will be involved, how long it will be, and also the complexity of the needs. But we like to do it over a couple of days in person, to do a workshop style, where we usually make use of business process flows to understand our partners' day-to-day work, and some interviews. So sometimes, depending on the size of the organization, the core project team on the partner side would go and do focus groups or interviews with their end users individually, which I think is a lot how Lawrence and WBR structured their discovery process, but I'll let him speak for himself, and bring back that feedback to us during that time. And then we make sure that we don't leave the room without being on the same page of how your functional processes work. But then during this time, we also take time to digest the information and validate that with the partner, where after only then we go into design to say, okay, now let's see how we can transfer this into technical solutions. Sometimes it makes more sense when the business processes are a bit more flexible, or it's a very young organization, that we can propose successful solutions or solutions out of the box. Like one of our products, AMP Impact, is a impact measurement tool, and that's based on industry best practice. So we might do a demo of how this tool has worked for other organizations, and then do a gap analysis for how we can get the partner onto a system and what customization beyond the tool is necessary. So that's a couple of ways that we can go about it. But maybe, Lawrence, maybe you can speak a little more about what the discovery process entailed on your side. I think, Belinda, you already shared quite a lot, but feel free to add.
Yeah, sorry. So as I said, I think with us it was important to get everybody on board, and so we didn't want to assume the issues that the end users were facing and what they expected from the solution. That's why it was important to have these meetings with them to get more details about what their perspective was and what the functionalities that we're looking forward to. So we also had meetings with program staff, and everybody was involved to just go through all the issues that we're expecting and the challenges that we wanted to solve. And after that, that's when now we came back to our partner Vera Solution to look at how the system should be designed, and after documenting clearly what the requirements should look alike. And to us, that was very, very critical at that phase, just making sure everyone was involved and they were part and parcel of the whole process.
Thanks, Lawrence. So another question from Martin is, what tools are used for analytics? So I believe both of you use Salesforce reports and dashboards to analyze your data. Is that correct? Lawrence?
Yeah, we do use that, but we've moved a little further to using Einstein Analytics, which is a more advanced feature of Salesforce when it comes to visualization and analytics.
Yeah, I saw that on your dashboard slide. It's a very powerful AI tool as well, product of Salesforce. What about you, Belinda? Any other tools that you use beyond just the Salesforce reports and dashboards?
Not at the moment. We predominantly use Salesforce to do most of our analysis and data visualization. I wanted to add something around the discovery sessions and something that helped. We did, I spoke about it at length previously, but one of the things that really helped us to clarify our needs was the use of the user stories that Vera brought onto the table. And this particular process really helped us to clarify our needs, and we came out of that understanding ourselves even better and understanding what needs were perceived versus what needs were felt. And so yes, user stories were really, really critical, and I believe it also helped the Vera Solutions to really understand us as a program, because at the end of the day, I was very impressed at how much they understood our program, even though it's very complex that even an insider sometimes needs to take time before they completely understand the nitty-gritties of our program. So the user stories were really, really critical.
Great, thanks, Belinda. We have a couple more questions, and I'm not sure we'll get to all of them, but we'll follow up on the Slack channel itself. So we have one here from Madhu, which is approximately how long did it take you to develop the system from start to now? And also, did it mean you had to revisit your own organizational work or strategies? So Belinda, do you want to take a crack at that question?
Sure. I mentioned that for us, we took a phased approach, and it was scheduled to span over 3 years. So 3 phases spanning over 3 years. And every year we had a deployment of the product, and then we test it out and run it through the rest of the year. But even during that time, in between the release of one solution or the product of one phase, we still had a lot of revisions and updates here and there. And that actually speaks to what Lei was asking about the scope of work and how it can change, because we realized that a solution needed a few tweaks here and there to be able to work all right. So in between the year before we launched the next phase of our release, we've done we do a lot of tweaks and adjustments to what has already been launched. So it's been a 2-year journey for us as RefugePoint, and we hope to end it at the end of this year, and would have clocked 3 years from the beginning of this process. That is from our initial discovery session.
Great. And the phase approach has allowed you to kind of start piecemeal using the system, which I like. How about you, Lawrence? How long, I know that this has been not the first project that we've undertaken together with WBR, but how long did this particular project take to implement?
Yeah, I think it came to about a year, a period of one year from the time that we arrived at the solution, and we spent about 2-3 months just evaluating Tarwex to understand all the functionalities and how they can apply to our work. All that period of getting user stories and so on, and coming up with a functional requirement documents. So I think it came down to a period of about 12 months before we could start testing the solution.
And to the other part of the question was, now that you are using the solution, have you changed any of your internal organizational processes or strategies because of it?
Yeah, so in our case, yeah, there are a few processes that we needed to adjust so that we just strike a balance between what technology can offer and what our processes should be. So there are a couple of processes that we had to change, but of course in a better way, in a more efficient and time-saving way. So we had a couple of changes just to fit into how the solution functions.
Okay, thanks for that. So I think we'll take one more question here, and then we'll follow up on the Slack channel to make sure that we cover everyone's questions. This one is from me again. Do you need an in-house database administrator most of the time for these projects, or does it depend on the ongoing support contract? So from Vera Solutions side, we always say it's essential to have a system administrator within the organization, but I'll let Lawrence, why don't you tell us about how you manage it on your side?
Yeah, I think from my experience, it's always critical that you have that person within your organization. I think it's very difficult if you have an external person to be a system admin. It becomes very, very complicated. So I think what people should look out to is to make sure that there is someone who is who has the capacity to do that within the organization. It becomes much easier, because I mean, rolling out such technologies comes out with a lot of issues. There are always ongoing issues that come out from the field that you need to attend to. So it's important that you have that kind of person within your organization.
Yeah, and Lawrence, you're now a pro in Salesforce and TerraWorks already, but it's always our goal at Vera to make sure that when we hand over the system, the partner feels empowered to take ownership of that system, that they don't need to rely on external people necessarily, unless they're bringing in new functionality like you did recently. But we always try to set you up for success in terms of allowing for training and support. And I remember, Lawrence, you came down to Cape Town the one time to do some training with my colleague Etila, and I think that's definitely the approach we always take. Belinda, anything you want to add around that?
Exactly what Lawrence has said, and I had covered it also before by saying that, you know, having an in-house person who was bridging that communication gap between the teams and the developer has really helped. And I can say over time, our monitoring team, who are the main administrators right now, have really grown in terms of their proficiency to manage the tools and the solutions right now, that as time goes by, we're minimizing the amount of back and forth that we have to continue doing with Vera, and pretty much now standing on our own 2 feet in terms of managing it in-house. I would really say that you need an in-house one, especially because we've mentioned severally that real-time data is really important. And so when you need to outsource that, or when you need to have a longer connection to someone outside of your organization, it may take time to resolve issues. And also you need someone who really understands the intricacies of your program or your nature of work to be able to troubleshoot accurately.
Yeah, that's a great point. No one will know your organization and programs like you do. So I think we will wrap it up there, so I can give you all some time to go get a cup of coffee before your next Good Tech Fest session. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Belinda and Lawrence, for talking with me. And I'm sure there is a lot of, I definitely had a few good learnings to take away from the session, from what you shared from your experiences. And we'll be sure to follow up with some resources in the Slack channel, the slides, as well as answering some of the remaining questions that we didn't get to. So thank you all so much, and enjoy the rest of Good Tech Fest.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.